those who have witnessed a wedding objection during the speak now or forever hold your peace portion. What happened? Story 1. At my cousin's wedding, when the exchanging of vows took place, my aunt shouted, "Wasn't there supposed to be a part where you could object?" or something along those lines. Story 2. A member of my wife's family had a pirate-themed wedding. A rival pirate appeared and objected to the wedding. The groom dueled him with rapiers and won. Story 3. The groom himself. He just stood up there and started crying and, in front of everyone, told the bride that he'd fallen out of love with her a while before, but he didn't know how to break it off. It was extremely uncomfortable. They both stepped out, and 10 minutes later came back out and got married, because she'd apparently told him she was pregnant. They're still together, with 3 kids, and I'm not sure about the husband, but I can confirm that the wife is having an affair. Neither of them are happy, but she has a comfortable life and he doesn't have the spine to leave. Story 4. Nobody had said, "Speak now," but the groom's ex still decided to get up and scream that he was her soulmate, that she forgave him for this whole thing, and that they should leave now because he'd proven his point by breaking up with her 5 years earlier, falling in love, and holding a wedding. I ate so much cake and got so drunk at that wedding. Meanwhile, everyone else was screaming and throwing. Good times. The bride was my boyfriend's ex. No idea why they invited us. Story 5. One of my friends interrupted his cousin's wedding to come out of the closet. He couldn't understand why people were so pissed at him. Edit. This was the second time my friend had come out to his family. The first time was when he was a teenager, about 8 years earlier, and 90% of his family that was attending said wedding was already aware. Story 6. This happened very recently, but in a different manner than the other comments I'm seeing. For years, groom and best man are super close, room together, and the running joke is that they're more than friends. Later on, groom meets bride, falls in love, and proposes. New running joke is that best man is very disappointed that groom is marrying someone else. At the wedding, officiant asks if anyone has objections. Best man objects. Officiant quickly overrules the objection. It was planned, and bride thought it was a funny way to acknowledge the super close friendship between groom and best man. Did not result in anyone being kicked out or awkwardness. Fun and surprisingly appropriate. Story 7. I was at an outdoor ceremony once, with a storm coming in. The pastor was trying to move things along so that we wouldn't get caught in the rain. The reception was indoors. He asked if anyone knows of any objection, and instantly, there was a loud clap of thunder. To his credit, the pastor just paused a moment and then said, "Anyone else? All right, in that case," and finished the ceremony. Edit. The couple is still together, and happily a fake. I was the +1, so I'm not super close to them. So take that passive-aggressive supernatural objector. Edit 2. Holy cow! I go to sleep and wake up with gold. Thanks, kind Redditor. Story 8. Only once, but it was non-romantic. The father of the bride had been pretty absentee after her parents' divorce. He had remarried and gotten into the Christian Science religion, and they were both pretty terrible. The new wife was not invited to my friend's wedding, but the father came, and it seemed like he was there to be supportive. He stood up during vows and proclaimed my friend was just like her mother, and the groom should get out while he can because my friend was a soul-leeching succubus. Not the worst wedding I ever went to. Story 9. Went to a co-worker's wedding and the maid of honor objected and admitted to being the other woman, and that the groom had been cheating with her for months. The bride left in tears and the groom immediately tried to get with the MOH, but she told him she wasn't going to hurt the bride further and that he needs to off. The bride is doing much better and is now a manager here, and I haven't heard from the groom in over a year. The MOH and bride are on speaking terms, but I don't think their relationship is going to ever be what it used to be. Story 10. I saw it nearly happen at my uncle's wedding. A friend of theirs got too drunk, and when Say said "speak now," he smiled, started to stand up. My mother grabbed him by his hair and sat him back down by force. Edit. Clarification and context. It was my mother, the groom's sister. The drunk was a close friend of both the bride and groom, so he was seated up front. He's a nice dude, but sometimes a bit of a... It was a small, non-traditional wedding. They were wed in the botanical gardens by a justice of the peace. The reception was held in the same place. When you entered the area for the wedding reception, there was an open bar, so some people helped themselves before the ceremony started, and one overindulged a bit. Story 11. When I was 13, we went to my second cousin's wedding. Everything is going great. They even got past the speak now or forever, hold your peace part. They wrote their own vows, but before my second cousin's fiancée wife could even begin her vows, his son got up, announced to the entire room that she was cheating on his dad with her drug dealer, and he couldn't let his dad marry her. My second cousin yelled at his son to either sit down or leave. The son left. My second cousin married her anyways, and 5 years and 1 baby later he finds out it was true, and they separated but were too tweaked out to be able to afford a divorce. Finally, he got married a third time, but before he could get married, his third, now ex-wife had to pay for their divorce. This wedding had no objections. They moved to Missouri, and this time instead of separating or asking for a divorce, He decided he didn't want to be married anymore and just moved back to Cali to get back together with his second ex-wife. Yep, family dinners are a little awkward. Story 12. My friend almost paid me to do it at my dad's marriage and I was so close to agreeing, but my dad overheard and stopped me. I would have done it for free if I knew how fucking crazy that stupid woman was back then. Story 13. It was at my wedding that we had at my grandmother's house, who lives out in the country next to a cattle farm. The cows didn't make a peep till that moment and one finally went moo. We all laughed and continued, but it was a funny moment about my wedding. Edit. Just gotta add the normal part about being my highest post. And best, it's about a cow going moo. Story 14. About 5 years ago, a coworker of mine invited all of us to his wedding. He was a great guy, but none of us had ever met his wife, seen pictures of her, and he always said nothing but good things of her. Fast forward to the wedding, it was an incredibly nice one. Looks like they paid quite a bit for it. Everything was going smooth and I was having fun and assumed so was everyone else. Anyway, now they're both at the altar or whatever, looking deeply into each other's eyes and smiling, and when that line comes of, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," I get anxious. But nothing ever happens. So right as soon as the anxiousness faded away, the bride's mother stood up and objected, blurted some about how she doesn't want to continue their family with a man like him. He was black. She was white. The bride-to-be cried, ran off. Wedding went fucking silent. Bride's dad took the mom and ran after the bride. The groom stood there incredibly awkward. He may or may not have achieved actually leaving his body. Anyway, the groomsmen took him away. I left because it was too weird. Apparently the reception went on. They did not get married that day, but ended up together anyway privately. And surprisingly, work wasn't weird. He laughed about it. And they are happily married. Edit. Just so I don't have to individually reply to everyone's comments and questions, the MIL never truly stated it was because he was black. But this guy was incredibly nice, selfless, and just someone who you completely felt comfortable around. Never judged anyone either and well-spoken. The MIL also never showed signs of hating him. Who knows why it happened? Maybe the bride and groom found out. I'm not sure. I since moved and haven't spoken to them. But man, does that memory last. Story 15. A wedding I was at. One guy got up and pledged his undying love for the bride, followed by 4 or 5 others objecting for various reasons, including one guy's love for the groom. By the second or third objection, though, it was clear that the whole thing was a clever ruse. I found out later that it was all set up by the bride as a prank on the unsuspecting groom and family and friends. It was pretty hilarious. Story 16. The best man at my stepsister's wedding did this. It happened at the rehearsal the night before. It was a very large wedding and the rehearsal was bigger than a lot of weddings. The minister was going over the vows quickly while giving instruction on what to do. When he said something about objections, the best man interrupted, saying he had to put a stop to this. He was in love with the bride and was sure she felt the same way. My sister and everyone else was horrified. It caused plenty of chaos and confusion. As far as I know, after that, neither the bride nor groom ever spoke to him again. Story 17. My wife drugged me to a wedding that I did not want to be at years ago. But I'm forever grateful that she did, because I was able to witness one of the greatest spectacles of human drama that has ever taken place. This was like an episode of Jerry Springer mixed with Cops. Bride's lover spoke up at that moment and yelled, "I'll be goddamned if I'm going to keep my mouth shut and let you steal my woman. You sorry piece of..." This deranged old redneck proceeds to come at the groom with a pistol, threatening to shoot him if he doesn't give her up. It wasn't a huge wedding, maybe 40 or so people, but every single one of them went screaming and running, and maybe 2 people stayed and called the cops. I grabbed my wife's hand and we retreated outside to watch the rest of the scene unfold from the church window. Story 18. Grooms. Dad interrupted the wedding to ask the bride's father whether or not she was truly a virgin. Then he went on about how he didn't know anything of the wedding and blah blah blah. Truly weird and embarrassing. I was there with an ex-boyfriend. Edit. He is my ex-boyfriend. When the groom's father interrupted the wedding, the bride's father, officiating the wedding, did in fact say it was confirmed. I have no clue how or what. They seemed to be super conservative and wore sleeved dresses, long hair, etc., and were Af-American. They eventually showed the father-in-law out and continued with the ceremony, which was super awkward afterwards. It was literally as if I was on Pranked Sayed X, seemed to find the ordeal entertaining because she was humiliated. This was his family, bride, and that sort of sealed the deal. Something was wrong with the guy. We broke up a week later. Story 19. I was working at a wedding when I was younger. I was running the bar at the reception, which was very close to the hall the weddings were at. We were told that the reception would begin around 4 p.m. It was already about 3-ish, and I was packing fridges, the usual barman things, while one of the male guests was still sitting there drinking. I asked if he was not joining the reception, to which he replied something along the lines of, "When I have the courage." He downs his drink and leaves. 10 minutes later, he's back, looking extremely disappointed. Guy orders a drink, and less than 30 seconds later, another guy who's dressed extremely well, turned out to be the groom, walks in, punches him in the back of the head, and leaves. This dude just picked his drink up and sipped it further. I eventually found out that this dude had downed his drink, walked into the reception's down, admitted to sleeping with the wife on her hen night, and again the night before the wedding. He was never invited to the wedding. He just felt the groom needed to know. So he found out where the wedding was, suited up, and dropped the info mid-ceremony. Story 20. I went to a wedding when I was 5. It was between my older brother and his fiancée. Anyways, they said the whole speak now spiel. And right before he was done, little 5-year-old me said, "I object," and everyone turned to me. I was dead silent because I didn't know what would happen. My dad asked me, "Well, why do you object?" And I said, "I did not know what would happen if I did," and I was promptly seated. Edit. Obligatory thanks for the silver edit 2 and gold. Story 21. A friend of the couple's in cosplay armor, think Master Chief, ran in, asked the date, said, "Then I'm not too late," pointed a big fake spacey rifle at the bride and said, "Mother of the Xenocide, the fruit of thy womb will never destroy my planet. Die." Not her name. And the groom went, "Her name is her name." Seriously? Seriously. This is date? Yes. Time? Yes. Almost right location? Oh no. You want other, very similar location. One so commonly confused the invitations had mentioned it. Oh, my bad. Have a nice day. Theater majors, man. I do not even. Story 22. At my own wedding. But not in the traditional way. We were getting married along a river at the end of summer and tons of wakeboarders and boats were out. I was a ball of nerves and the ceremony felt so serious. When all of a sudden, some dude bro on a boat blasting music screamed, "Don't do it, bro!" and sped off. It was actually hilarious and made the rest of the ceremony a lot more fun. My husband and I cracked up even though his brothers looked like they were about to jump in the river after the guy. On mobile. Sorry for formatting issues. Story 23. I was 1 year old when my mom married my stepdad. During the objection portion, I yelled, "Stop!" but no one listened. They divorced 6 years later. I told you, Mom. I fucking told you. Story 24. My aunt was getting married to her second husband, and during the speak now or forever hold your peace bit, their baby started crying. The dude officiating it said, "If anyone older than 6 months has any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace." He got a laugh, and the wedding carried on. They're still together 10 years later, so I guess whatever my cousin had to say was misinformed. Story 25. I don't understand that if someone objected and get thrown out during the ceremony anyway, then why would they open the chance for them to object in the first place? Can't they just cut off that line and let the bride and groom kiss in peace? Story 26. No objections were made, unfortunately, but back when I worked in a hotel a few years ago, I got to witness a very interesting wedding. In preparation, we had to ensure we'd ordered enough blue WKD in, as this was the groom's drink of choice. First red flag. The whole wedding took place in the hotel. The function room also hosted the ceremony, so we started pretty early that day. Before the ceremony, the bride had taken 3 bottles of Prosecco up to her room while she was getting ready, and was clearly tipsy before the wedding started, but seemed to act sober enough that whoever was conducting the ceremony was none the wiser. Ceremony seemed normal, but I was prepping the bar so wouldn't have known either way. As it ends, all the guests flood out for drinks whilst we changed the function room and set out the tables for the sit-down meal. The guests were rough as a badgers, to put it politely. I already knew one of them as he'd been to the hotel before, acting like a total when I told him the bar was closed and I wouldn't be serving him. However, he was being especially polite to me this time, as it was clear his date for the wedding was definitely not the same girl he was in with just a few weeks ago, who I suspect was a paid acquaintance. Before the meal even began, we were starting to worry if we'd have enough alcohol. These people drank like fish, but we managed to get them all seated and fed, and everyone is being friendly and well-behaved. As the night goes on, the bride is slowly becoming so drunk she can barely stand, and has changed from her wedding dress into a very scant pink negligee with a tutu skirt. She's also given up on using the bathroom, so she loudly announces she will be relying solely upon nature wheeze from this point onwards. Before midnight, we are nearly totally out of spirits. The guests are ordering shots every round. I'd tried to deny service, but my manager was having none of it, and as the hotel was struggling, they wanted to make as much money as possible and have shotted us out of almost everything. Blue WKDs are long gone, but the groom has a lovely blue smile at this point. After the bride finally gives up trying to shot disgusting liquors that have likely been there since the hotel was built, they head to the dance floor. The party starts winding down and it's time for the last dance. But the bride decides she'd prefer to have this with a male wedding guest, which really fucks off the groom. She then loudly announces she'll be throwing an after-party in their suite, and everyone is invited in the hot tub. Funnily enough, the groom isn't thrilled and kicks off. Another member of staff manages to calm everyone down, and convinces the DJ to play the last dance song once more before he leaves, and the groom agrees. Everyone starts packing up and the bride comes back from her room in her third outfit of the night, a nice gray-stained tracksuit. She's adamant she wants another cigarette before bed. God knows how many packs she went through that day. Especially sad considering the money for the wedding came from her parents' inheritance, who both died of cancer. She can't find a lighter and becomes irate, screaming at the groom for one. Groom claims he doesn't have one, but not taking no for an answer, she rifles through his pockets and finds one. Holding it aloft, she screams at him that he's a liar and slaps him clean across the face. The groom, obviously not having enjoyed this, returns the favor and punches her in the face. The best man spots this and leaps across a sofa and tackles the groom to the floor. They're now having a full-on fistfight whilst the bride sobs incoherently. I try and get out of the way as I'm being trampled by Mr. WKD and his scummy friend. My supervisor storms in saying he found coke in the bathroom and the police are on their way. The best man is off like a robber's dog, and the groom stands there stunned and then follows his new wife into the function room. We then hear screaming and shouting from that room, and the bride has picked up a chair and launched it at her husband and was now holding a second one trying to attack him with it. At this point, it's about 2 a.m. and I am royally done with the day. My mom is waiting for my outside, so I grab my bag and head off, giving my supervisor strict instructions to tell me exactly how this ends when I'm back for my next shift. I pass a riot van of police officers on the way out of the door, direct them to the drama, and go home. Next shift, I'm informed that an ambulance arrived shortly after the police. The groom was taken to the hospital after sustaining a head injury, but he did a runner from the paramedics when he got to the hospital. The bride stayed at the hotel, and to console herself spent the night with the male wedding guest she danced with. They left together in the morning, and a week later announced on Facebook she was in a new relationship with him. TLDR, bride and groom were absolutely hammered and got into a fistfight. Best man joined in but fled before the police arrived. Bride spent the night with a wedding guest in the honeymoon suite whilst her new husband was transported to hospital. Edit. Thank you for the gold. That is so kind. Second edit. Changed here to here because I'm a lemon. A few quick clarifications. 1. For those unfamiliar, a nature wee means to urinate outside and is sometimes known as a wild wee. Do with that information what you will. Not an Irish wedding, but I have a lots of Irish family, so I can understand why that assumption may have been made. 3. Thank you for the shiny coins and kind comments about my word choice. I'm glad it helped to set the scene. Story 27. The guy ended up objecting kind of late. It was right before the bride and groom kissed. The man who objected told the bride that the groom was marrying her for the wrong reasons. There was a little bit of a tussle between the security guards and the objector, but there is a happy ending to this story. A dragon showed up and ate Lord Farquaad, then Shrek and Fiona lived happily ever after. Edit. Forgot a comma. Story 28. I was best man at a wedding, and the groom's older sister decided to play a joke and stood up and said, "I object," then started giggling. Groom's mother stood up, slapped her, told her it was not an appropriate joke, and told her to go home. This mother still refuses to talk to her daughter 4 years later. Edit. Wow. Went to bed and woke up to all the comments. But for those of you asking, it was not the first time this daughter in particular had done something to this mom off. And this was the first time I had ever seen this mom hit any of her kids. I have known the family 15 years. I also found out later that the mom had spent over $50K on this wedding. Story 29. I was at an Orthodox Jewish wedding with a chuppah ceremony where they read a contract and recite 7 blessings. The groom's dad pinched his son's derriere at a most solemn moment, caused him to loudly shriek into the silent audience of 400. Bride saw and snorted loudly. They also publicly kissed after the ceremony, which was a huge scandal. Edit. Bride and groom kissed. Populace could speak of nothing else for months. Edit 2. No, it's not against Jewish law. It's the community's sensibilities. They just do not do PDA. Edit 3. It wasn't an objection, but it sure sounded like one during the reading of the contract. Story 30. To be fair, I didn't witness this, but it happened to my parents. My mom invited an ex she was still rather close with to her wedding, and he stood up and yelled, "I object." Little did everyone at the wedding know, my dad had gotten rather close with him and paid him to stand up and object just for the shits and giggles, and he bursts out laughing. My mom didn't find it as funny, and it really started their marriage off on the right foot. Story 31. I heard of a wedding in which a guy ran in, told the bride that the groom was actually already married, and had his madwoman wife, and the objector's sister, locked away in his attic. So they all went to see the crazy wife and proved she existed, but she later died in a house fire that left the groom blind, and the bride still took him back. Wild. Story 32. Not speak now part. But, well, you'll see. Friend of mine was getting married in the park under the trees because both of them were nature people, and groom had a dog that went everywhere with him that wasn't allowed in any church because dog despite being well-trained and quiet. There were some rows of chairs with lots of people filling them, including groom's mother, who was sitting with his dog. Bride and groom were at the front with the officiant. Officiant begins. Officiant comes to the part where he says, "Do you take?" Groom's dog, Shadow, began to howl a loud, long, mournful howl. Everyone laughed. Officiant started the question again. Loud, long, mournful howl again. Everyone laughed. Groom told Shadow to come to the front. Shadow ran up, stood directly in between the bride and groom, and the officiant started again. Not a peep from Shadow. Her vows. His vows. Officiant looked at Shadow and asked, "Shadow, do you take bride and groom to be your lawfully wedded parents?" Shadow barked one single bark. Officiant concluded the ceremony. Everyone cheered and clapped, and Shadow barked 3 times. The only times that he made any sounds. Not kidding, beautiful dog too. Story 33. So I'm attending this ultra-chill beach wedding in small-town Canada. I don't know most anyone because it was my ex-step-aunts. So my brother's family I never see. It was fun anyways. The bride flew in on a seaplane and all the chairs were set up on the sand. Anyways, the groom is from Trinidad and Tobago, so all his relatives traveled a long way and had cool accents. There was a party before. We were all a little bit tipsy, so as the ceremony progresses, everyone is watching, getting teary from the vows. Then the line comes, any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now. Nobody expected this. The father of the groom gets up, flailing, and a collective gasp followed by silence overtakes this tiny venue. We're all waiting with bated breath, but he's just standing there with glassy eyes. Turns out he was baked. This 70-plus man in a suit and dreads laughs and says, "No, I kid, I kid." And the whole spirit of the audience cheers up as he sits back down. Rest of the reception, people are going up to him saying, "Good one," or scolding him, "Damn good night. Best wedding I've been to." Story 34. I used to be an audio engineer, this one smaller chapel I was running sound for a wedding, and the officiant got to that station in the ceremony. A woman stood up and said something. My station was recessed into the wall and I couldn't quite hear her. She spoke for 5 or 6 seconds and the room had a few upset shocked sounds. Another woman on the side of the room near me just spoke up saying, "Don't you listen to nothing she has to say. You two go ahead and get married." The room laughed and the ceremony persisted. Story 35. I attended a wedding as a guest of a family member, and when the pastor said that the doors busted open to the sanctuary and a man appeared and started to say, "I do," but 2 huge ushers, one who was my date, quickly grabbed the guy before he could say anything but under the arms, and literally lifted him up off the floor and carried him out. The wedding continued as normal. Turned out the guy was the ex of the bride. Strangest sight I ever saw. Story 36. I once went to a wedding where both families were Irish. GF knew them, but I didn't. At the ceremony, the groom's ex-wife started shouting and was gently directed outside. I couldn't hear what was said. The reception was amazing. Nice venue and all, but a bunch of guests had brought their own instruments and just started jamming what I can only describe as a genuine Irish jig. This went on for hours and remains a lasting memory of oral beauty, but I digress. There was a lot of booze. There was no responsible serving of alcohol, and I'm certain it was by design. At some point, I used the men's room and was curious if I'd just seen the groom in a stall, door open, with someone who was not the bride. I didn't know these people, and it might have just been someone else, so said nothing. Sometime later, and the GF states seriously, "We should get going now." Yeah, sure. We grab our and head downstairs. I see the suspicious fellow again in the stairwell going to absolute town on this same lady. GF grabs my arm tightly and keeps walking past. Mumbles a thank you for the invite. I just smile and follow cause it's all weird. Yep, that was the groom, octopussing his ex-wife. At his own wedding to another woman, the bride genuinely seemed a gem. The look that woman gave us as we passed was this smugly dominant, "I always get what I want, yeah," drunk as glare. Wow, they had some reasonable bubbly in a tub for people to take home, and who would know or care if we horked a few extras? I got it all explained to me after we were in a cab and well on our way home. I never got a follow-up to that story, but 10/10 on the music. Would tag along to an Irish wedding again. Story 37 friend was getting married to his heroin-addicted girlfriend. Myself, his brother, and his mom all made it very clear that what he was doing was incredibly fucking stupid. She's a bad influence on him. She's going nowhere in life. And the only reason he's marrying her is because she enables him. We told him we won't attend the wedding. His mom made it perfectly clear his wife would not be invited to any family functions. So what did my buddy do? He got married to his heroin-addicted girlfriend. The divorce was finalized 9 months later. Shit went about as well as everyone said it would, not very. Story 38. This was in the early 70s in semi-rural Washington state. My cousin was getting married, and my aunt and the mother of the groom did not get along well. During the ceremony, when the pastor got to the part about objecting, my aunt said something to my uncle, and the groom's mom jumped up and grabbed my aunt, and they started going at it, all the way out the door and into the parking area. They were separated, and everyone filed back into the barn, where the wedding continued. The best part, though, was when another one of my cousins simply walked into the woods after the wedding because that's where he lived. Story 39. It was a medieval-themed wedding. The best man declared his love for the bride, challenged the groom to a fight for her love. They march outside, draw swords, and go at it. Apparently, they choreographed 2 nights a week for like 6 months, but it honestly looked like they were trying to kill each other. The groom wins and everything goes on like normal 0-0 weird but cool. Edit corrected groomsman to groom. Thanks all. COD. Story 40. Mom got married to my stepdad. Uncle objected. After the attention was focused on him, he just asked if they were still going fishing afterwards. To which my stepdad reached into his suit and pulled out his fishing hat. Very sweet and romantic. They love to fish together. Rip though, remind me to upload the video. Wish I could find a cheap way to digitize the VHS to upload it online. Edit. Bought a VHS TV combo from Goodwill. Story 41. For anyone wondering how rare this happens, I work weddings. Something like 50, 60 a year. My boss has been doing similar numbers for the last 30 years. He has never seen nor heard of this happening at any of the weddings he's worked. Story 42. My cousin was big into bodybuilding when he was younger and has always been really tall. Around the time he got married, he was probably 6'6", 260 lbs. I was 18 at the time, and I'll never forget when the priest asked, "Are there any objections to this union?" My cousin turned to the crowd and opened his arms wide and gestured as if daring someone to object. The whole place erupted in laughter. It was amazing. Story 43. Not at a wedding, but at a funeral. A young man, mid-20s, had passed away rather suddenly in some sort of accident. His wife of a year or so and their respective families and friends are all in attendance as they are getting ready to lower him into the ground. The pastor dude asks if anyone would like to say anything further, and another woman in her early 30s stood up. She began to tell everyone in attendance about how much pain she was in over the loss of the love of her life and that the two of them were going to be together, and now they can't. Yup, the poor wife had to find out about the cheating at the funeral. Story 44. This might not count, but it was like 12 hours before the wedding. One of my ex's best friends had a destination wedding in Mexico. Both parties stayed in a huge mansion house overlooking the water. I wasn't in the wedding party, but I was in a hotel close by. The night before the wedding, the bridesmaids and groomsmen stayed up late partying. Everyone passed out, but at midnight or so, the bride's mom woke up because she heard the living room speakers since they had been playing music. She happens to hear noise coming from outside, and she goes out there, and the maid of honor was in the hot tub having with the groom. Maid of honor had been raised by bride's mom, basically like a second mom thing, so she was shocked to say the least they had just bought a house to. The wedding never happened, and I enjoyed my vacation and returned the dress edit. Super after the fact, but I did some research, and last year they made up, got married, and had a kid. I feel bad for the girl for not just kicking him aside. Story 45. Saw on YouTube a video where, when that question was asked at a gay wedding, a drag queen protested in the most comedic ally melodramatic fashion. Only the grooms were in on it. Not even the preacher was in on the joke. The guests were shocked until the reveal. Hysterical. Story 46. Got booted out of my cousin's wedding reception with about 20 other people. My cousin had her wedding on a farm with a massive pig roast. From what I remember, there was a massive amount of people. Anyway, her father and my other older cousin never really got along. At one point during the reception, my older cousin had enough and absolutely lost it. He looked at a handful of us and asked if we had his back. Of course, we all nodded, not really knowing what was about to happen. He disappeared and a few minutes later comes back with a 20 lb bag of meat from the leftover roast. He walks down to where my cousin's dad is. My aunt proceeds to yell, "Lonnie, no!" and smacks him right in the side of the face with the bag of meat. An all-out family brawl ensued. The whole family hasn't been invited to a wedding ever since. Story 47. My dad insisted on having this in his and my mom's wedding because he wanted it to mean, "Speak now or forever hold your peace," meaning my mom was his piece of. Almost 40 years later, they're still married. Side note, when he walked me down the aisle at my first wedding, he let me know I could still say no even 2 steps from Pachelbel's canon in D. I said nope and giggled. Silly me. We were divorced 6 years later. Story 48. It almost happened at a wedding we were supposed to be going to. They had heard about each other's religious beliefs a few days before. My uncle, bride's father, said better off because he would have stopped the wedding if he had it go on. On a positive, me and the bride's nephew had the coolest birthday party. The bride's mother had everything switched from a wedding reception to a birthday party. Story 49. My boyfriend was friends with a guy who was getting a quickie marriage and needed witnesses. We agreed and went inside the little reception room, where the preacher, bride, and the groom were lined up waiting on us. The preacher started his thing and I noticed a woman come in and lean against the back wall. She looked pissed, standing with her arms crossed. Preacher, is there anyone here today who objects to the union of R&EK? Please. Speak now. The couple looked back at us and we both smiled. Suddenly, the bride's attention turned to the woman in the back of the room. Bride, what the fuss is she doing here? The woman quickly raises her hand, looking at the old preacher. Woman, I object. I don't agree with this marriage. The bride glares at her. Bride, shut up, bitch. Wait your fucking turn. It's my scheduled day. You're just mad you didn't think of it first. The woman had to be dragged out of the room, kicking and screaming and spitting at the bride. After the reception, my BF's friend explained that he was originally in a relationship with the bride. After 10 years together, he started sleeping with her sister, the woman. They were close sisters until both ladies got pregnant by him. Simultaneously, they fought each other like cats and dogs for the next several years, until the two cousins became school-aged and best friends. Neither one of the sisters would give up the man, and he wasn't sure which one he loved more, so he kept seeing both women. Last I heard, they were all still together, but the two sisters had teamed up to take down his pregnant mistress.